to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father. Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Owens and Johnny Sobchak here. It's been a minute. We've been stuck on Arrakis for quite some time, Johnny, but we are back. The spice was flowing all throughout March, multiple rewatches at the theater, and now it's time to not quite move on, because we'll never move on from Dune Part 2, I don't think, but at least look ahead to some other movies that we've seen since then. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well, Zach. Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been, as you said, a while. Dune was a totally encompassing experience in terms of the cinema for like the last few weeks. March, was pretty much dominated in terms of the conversation, everything. My mind was really fixated on Dune for a while. And now we're kind of just getting back up in terms of TV shows and some new releases at the theater coming out. I've caught up on a couple of horror movies and still have some catching up to do before we kind of get back into the swing of things with Civil War is right around the corner from Alex Garland and A24. I know Challengers at the end of April with Luca Guadagnino and of course Zendaya right after Dune and that success. So it's really starting to kind of get back into full gear, I feel, over the next few weeks. But it's been good. I mean, it hasn't been for lack of entertainment or things to watch or catch up on in terms of I think we'll have plenty to talk about and discuss this episode, hopefully.
Absolutely. Today we will be talking big week for apes, big couple weeks for apes at the theater. We'll be reviewing Monkey Man. That's the latest starring Dev Patel. And also I'll talk briefly about Godzilla. Is it Godzilla and Kong? Is that how because it's Godzilla X Kong.
It's Godzilla X Kong, Zach.
Godzilla X Kong, or is it Godzilla times Kong? Are we multiplying here? But Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. I saw that. I had a doubleheader, not a doubleheader, but Tuesday, Thursday, twice to the theater, both for primate related films. So big week at the theater for primates, but that's what's on tap today. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're following us on socials and subscribe to the Rewind newsletter so you can get all of our episodes, all of our reviews on the website, everything sent straight to you. Johnny, it's been about a month. What have we been watching lately over the last couple weeks? I know for me, it's not been as much, hence not having all these podcasts, but in general, midst of March, a little bit lacking at the theater, combined with March Madness basketball on 24/7. I've been watching a lot of basketball, so I have not seen nearly as many movies as we have been, the previous rate that we've been watching movies or TV shows. But what's been occupying your time?
Yeah, I've stayed pretty busy. I've actually been trying to, with a lack of like new releases that I've been interested in, at least I've been trying to watch more older movies that I've had on my list or been trying to get back to. So I've had opportunity to go check out a few, including, speaking of Dune, David Lynch's quote unquote version from 1984. It'd been years. I know a lot of people go to bat for that movie, had been telling me to watch it. Finally watched the 4K from Arrow Video. They had a good transfer of it. And the less I say, the better. Let's just say, thank the maker for Denis Villeneuve and what he's done with that novel and bringing it to life on screen. I watched Failsafe from Sidney Lumet, who is, I think, a fantastic filmmaker. 12 Angry Men is one of my favorite movies, and Failsafe was incredible. If you've never seen it, it's super overlooked, I feel like. From 1964, came out the same year as Doctor Strangelove, which is about some similar subject matter, and it just blew me away. I thought it was incredible, and that comes on the back of news, or kind of in front of news, I guess, since the news is more recent, that Denis Villeneuve is going to be making, supposedly, in some capacity, he's going to be involved with doing a nuclear war film, kind of going through like the, I guess, scenario where that were to occur. And there's obviously it's off the success of Oppenheimer. Obviously, that's in a lot of people's minds, amidst also things going on in the world. So that could be really interesting. But Failsafe, I think, is just a really terrifying version of that, or at least what that could look like. So yeah, definitely people should check that out. And also the Ten Commandments, which is obviously like a big classic, like epic, from like the studio system back in the 50s. I enjoyed it. Obviously, it has its issues and it's a little bit dated in certain respects, but it's very much like a movie that just you couldn't really imagine them trying to make that type of movie nowadays. And then also the other one that really stood out for me was Train Spotting, which is Danny Boyle's film. Came out the year I was born, 1996. Um, my brother actually chose that to watch like for his birthday. We were hanging out and he was like, "Oh, I like have been wanting to watch this. Let's check it out." And we both loved it. We thought it was great. I had heard and seen bits and pieces from it over the years, but I honestly didn't know that much about it, other than Ewan McGregor being the lead, and he's amazing in it. The movie itself is just, it's got that like live wire 90s like indie feel to it. And it really is I've thought about it a lot afterwards, I guess I'll say. And I won't say too much more about it if you don't know about it, but it's definitely a dark, kind of heavy movie. But it's definitely worth your time if you have not checked it out. And then with rewatches, I did check out Ex Machina in theaters. They did, A24 is doing these special IMAX releases for those that don't know. For March, it was Ex Machina. This month in April, it's going to be Hereditary, one night only for each of these. And then next month in May, they're going to do Uncut Gems. So Ex Machina, I hadn't seen it in a few years. Loved the movie previously, but it really kind of like every piece came together for me this time around. And maybe it was seeing it in theaters for the first time. I don't know. But I absolutely loved it. I think it's a masterpiece, and I'm really looking forward to. I already got my tickets for Hereditary, and I'll definitely be checking out Uncut Gems as well. And then in terms of sci-fi, I guess the other thing was The Abyss. So that came out on 4K in March, earlier in March. I love that movie. I think it's a really underrated James Cameron film. Before he did Titanic and Avatar, of course. And it's just there's not anything necessarily quite like it. It has elements of other movies that I really enjoy, but it's really its own thing. And I think for people that aren't familiar with it, you should check out the 4K. It's a great transfer, and just the movie overall I think is amazing. And if you like sci-fi, if you like adventure movies, survival films, it kind of checks all those boxes, and it has a good little romance in there as well. So yeah, outside of that, it's been interesting. I have only seen 4 new releases this year. I'll just be transparent.
But how many Dune rewatches? Like how many trips to the theater?
Okay, so I saw Dune, God, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in theaters. So I've been I've been to the theater more for Dune than I have for everything else combined in
Yeah,
3 months.
almost
So,
double.
yeah, so yeah, I'm guilty of that. I've obviously paid a lot of attention to Dune, but it's not to say there hasn't been other good stuff. I mean, we'll talk about Monkey Man here a little bit later. I did watch Love Lies Bleeding from A24 and Rose Glass. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was quite great by any means, but I thought Kristen Stewart was really good. I hadn't seen her in anything in a while, and Katie O'Brien was also excellent. Ed Harris, definitely not going to be for everyone. I mean, I don't think it's going to scratch all the itches necessarily, depending on what you're looking for. It's really like a crime noir story with like some surreal elements, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And then Late Night with the Devil, which has been in the news, or was in the news a couple weeks ago, for various reasons, including the use of AI images and things like that. I decided to check it out. It's like a $1 or $2 million movie with a somewhat wide release, and I went out of my way, and I thought it was fine. I honestly didn't think that it has like or at least it did have like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So that was part of my motivation to go. I was like, wow, I'm really curious. Like, are they really just doing some crazy things with like a low budget? Like, how impressive is it? I mean, I think it's, it's for the money, like it does a good job. But it didn't strike me necessarily as something I was like, wow, that's like super impressive. Like that's a great, like a little, micro budget horror film or whatever you want to call it. I thought it was just like decent, unfortunately. So didn't quite hit me like it did others, but outside of that, been pretty slow. Monkey Man, just checked that out yesterday, in Dolby, and I know we'll be getting to that a little bit later. But what have you been checking out in terms of movies or going to the theater, Zach? I know you've been busy with basketball among other things, but I'm curious to hear.
Let's see. As I mentioned, you know, March was all about Dune. Saw that 3 times at the theater. Rewatched the first part at home during that span as well. But it wasn't until this week that I returned to the theater for a non-Dune showing. Like I said, Godzilla X Kong, and Monkey Man. But in addition to that, rewatched La La Land for the first time in a couple of years, and absolute banger.
Yeah.
It's just it's so good. It was so nice to just like I think I was like swayed by the post Oscar, like the like seeing Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling together in very briefly at the Oscars, like the hype around all the Poor Things wins and Emma Stone and prep
Yeah.
for The Fall Guy. I had just listened to it was in December, but I listened to it just a couple weeks ago. Emma
Mhm.
Stone was on the Smartless podcast, so I was just like feeling my Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone vibes. So I had to revisit, and man, it's a classic,
Modern classic.
modern classic indeed. And on the TV front, I've been alternating between basketball and Survivor because I know I'd mentioned this recently on one of the episodes, but I've been a Survivor head since day one, since like I was literally like a child watching it with my family. We'd watch it every Wednesday. And we're 46 seasons deep. Season 46 is airing right now, and in 45 I finally got Rebecca to, after years of dating and marriage, to finally get invested in it. She would always protest and not watch it. Finally got hooked, so we've been going back and I've been showing her some of the like legendary seasons with like the best players and stuff. So we've watched Fans vs Favorites, we've watched Pearl Islands, now we're watching Second Chance, and that's all in addition to watching Survivor 46 right now week to week. So
Yeah.
I've been shooting hoops and snuffing torches, and have yet to get into it fully. 2 episodes deep in Three Body Problem. I know that came out a couple weeks ago, and I am very late to the game, but I'm invested in it. I'm very hooked. After these first 2 episodes, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say very hooked, but I'm very intrigued by it.
So you just backtracked on what you just said.
Well, I spoke too soon. I am hooked and interested, but I feel like saying very hooked makes it sound like I'm like, if I was very hooked, I would have watched more than 2 episodes by now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm
That's
very
fair.
intrigued by it, by everything that I've seen so far. And once we're recording on Sunday, so once the national championship happens tomorrow night, basketball's out of the way, and I can really lock in with Three Body Problem and finish up the rest of that. But
That's fair. I will say on that front with TV, it's been a little bit back and forth for me. I think we talked about this in the group chat, but I finally sat down and watched Veep.
you finished
On
all of it,
HBO.
or are you in the
Literally
midst?
just finished it last night. Yeah,
Amazing. Such a
amazing.
Rebecca and I have been rewatching that a little bit. She's been watching it to like fall asleep after her night
Yeah.
shifts, and it's just like hysterical.
No, I absolutely couldn't agree more. I totally understand that energy. I feel like this is definitely going to be a show that I go back as like a comfort show almost and have it on.
And you can just kind of throw on any of the episodes and be able
Yeah,
to just
exactly.
lock in and
You're like,
get
oh,
some
this
good
is like
laughs out of
this.
it.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this is what's happening here. Like, especially because it's political and set up in like terms and like over a certain
Mhm.
period of time. But yeah, no, I think it's incredible. Easily, I think one of my top 2 or 3 sitcoms ever, I would say. I mean, I'm not a big sitcom guy. I have a very particular, I guess, sense of humor. So for me, I thought this just really hit all the right beats. And so if you haven't checked it out, I mean, it was on my list forever. It's obviously not the newest show in the world. It ended in like 2019, even before the pandemic started. So 5 years ago. But it started in like 2012. So it went for 7 seasons. And I loved it. And then outside of that, been kind of it was alternating between that and then Three Body Problem. Watched it. I've read the books, so I'm a fan of this story, and the way that what it explores in terms of sci-fi and concepts and things like that. It's very high concept. The books especially. They do a really great job of adapting it and making it palatable, I think, for especially
Benioff and Weiss back? Are Benioff and Weiss cooking?
they are, I think they are cooking. Now we have to also credit, I believe it's Alexander Wu, who is like also co-running the show. Because he has definitely made an impact in terms of, I think, the way they're approaching material, and just having like an extra mind in the room, so to speak. So I'm very curious to hear what you think of it after you do watch it all, because 2 episodes in, I think the first 2 episodes are really good. But it definitely picks up, and I think as it goes along and it reveals more, I think it gets more.
Yeah,
Intriguing.
the first one like had a lot of work to do, just like setting the stage, and I was like, that was probably like a 3 out of 5. I was like, okay, we'll see what else this is about, and then the second episode definitely ramped it up, and I know you've talked about episode 5. I've seen posts about episode 5, so I
Yeah.
just need to keep on pushing until I get to that so I can be in the loop.
Yeah, I was thinking about this show for a long time just because I knew they were making it and I read the books. Was hoping they would do it justice, and I can honestly say I think they did as good a job as they could have done with this material. And I think it's a great show, great start. I think there's definitely room for improvement. I'm really hoping season 2 happens. Of course, I'm sure it will. You never know with Netflix, but I hope that we get that, and I think that it could be an amazing show potentially, depending on how they evolve over that, and knowing also in the books like what's to come. I think that there's definitely a lot there, so people will give it a chance. I've watched the season twice now. I blew through it in one weekend on my own because I just couldn't wait. I really want to get to it, and then I showed it to Reagan. I was really curious to see what she would think. She really likes and has an open mind when it comes to like sci-fi and like shows in general. But there's so many different weird things in it. And so I was like, I don't know how you're gonna feel about this, but she was hooked right away after the first couple episodes. And then we just blew through it in just a matter of, like I said, a couple days or like a weekend. So yeah, definitely check it out. I've only watched 4 new shows this year, technically. But I think that's probably my second best or favorite, behind Mr. and Mrs. Smith, most likely. So
Mhm.
definitely up there. But yeah, been busy, been a lot of good stuff. Like I said, not for lack of good material. I know Shogun's popping off right now. A lot of people loving that. At least I've from what I've seen on
I
social
still need to
media.
start that. I've
We
been
started it.
slacking.
We watched 1 episode, but yeah, I kind of wanted to wait a little bit longer for them to get through more episodes. So we'll probably run through that soon, and I'm excited to see what all the fuss is about. And then got plenty of other shows right around the corner and a busy schedule. But I know the thing that's still in my mind from just like I said yesterday is Monkey Man. I know you saw it before I did, and I was curious when I saw your rating and your reaction. I was like, I'm kind of concerned about going to see this. Not that I was going to say like, oh, it's going to be my exact same feelings as Zach, but um, I think I'm interested to hear more about your thoughts because you haven't really shared too much of them, maybe out of fear of conflict. But
No,
yeah,
I hit it with the just the 2.5 stars and didn't write anything on Letterbox because I was like, I just needed to think about it some more.
yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
but
We're on it.
let's set the stage. Monkey Man. This is Dev Patel's directorial debut. It's starring Dev Patel. It's written by Dev Patel and co-produced by Dev Patel. So really going all in on this one. Like I said, starring Dev Patel, we've got Sikandar Kher, Aditi Kalkunte, Sobita Dulipala, and Ashwina Kalsakar. Apologies on the pronunciations there in the cast. 87% critic score, 84% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I am, like I said, 2.5 stars. I was about a 51 out of 100. Johnny, you liked it a bit more. What are we thinking here before we get into the details?
Yeah, I did like it more than you for sure. I thought it was a good movie. I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd, and then I think overall score, it's a light like 7 out of 10. So I'd say it's like a right in like the 67, 70 mark for me.
Okay.
Um,
So we're not
overall.
like that significantly far off in the grand scheme of
No,
things,
you
but
just think it's bad, and I think it's good. That's all.
um No, let's get into it. A quick plot synopsis here. Inspired by the legend of Hanuman, an icon embodying strength and courage, Monkey Man stars Dev Patel as Kid, an anonymous young man who ekes out a meager living in an underground fight club where night after night, wearing a gorilla mask, he is beaten bloody by more popular fighters for cash. After years of suppressed rage, Kid discovers a way to infiltrate the enclave of the city's sinister elite. As his childhood trauma boils over, his mysteriously scarred hands unleash an explosive campaign of retribution to settle the score with the men who took everything from him. I'll say it off the top. This may be on me. I watched the trailer. I watched the trailer for this maybe like once prior to going in, but it wasn't like immediately going in. And I feel like it just wasn't necessarily what I was expecting, because like obviously there was all the discourse, not discourse, that sounds negative, but like the comparisons between this and John Wick, and I was like, so like in my mind the loose premise was like it's a guy that goes around in a monkey mask just like fucking shit up and like wreaking havoc, and like it that happens like very briefly. The monkey significantly less monkey mask than I thought was going to be in this, unfortunately. But I thought it was going to be more like just straight up action thriller the entire time. And
No,
like
it's not that.
it's very like I think for me the pacing was very start and stop. Like I feel like you kind of get that a little bit more like a hotter start, and then like that middle period, it's like it ramps up and then there's like a peak in the first act, and then the middle act is like very slow and like introducing all of the like political and religious turmoil, and it's kind of like almost like Dark Knight Rises. He's like thrown in the pit when Dev
Yeah.
Patel is like at the temple and he's training and learning and recovering. And then you get like the explosive third act, which is like what I was expecting the entire thing to be.
Right.
So I feel like for me, the like off and on pacing of going between the action sequences, the periods in between, the flashbacks, and like the history of Kid as a child and what this trauma was that was sort of haunting him throughout. Like it's hinted at, it's never explicitly stated, and then we're going back and forth between the present day and those flashbacks to kind of unveil it as we go along.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was maybe like the biggest thing for me of just like the mindset when I was going into this movie. And not really expecting some of the like heavier, I guess, but also just like the more like the politically charged stuff and the I don't know, just the stuff that wasn't like straight up action, which is not to say that I can't appreciate stuff that's not just action, but like I wasn't anticipating that from this. So
Right.
again, if that was more hinted at in the trailer that I watched once like 2 months ago, that's on me. But
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, Zach, and I definitely understand that perspective. Like I don't I understand like why you feel the way you do. It is interesting because I remember when the marketing like really kicked off, I think maybe yeah, like you said, a couple months ago, earlier in the year. People were really like hype about the movie, and like the trailer and the poster looked cool. I didn't watch the trailer. I was just like, oh, like Jordan Peele, like Dev Patel directing, Jordan Peele involved. It's an
mhm.
action movie, like set in India. Like that all sounds really good. Like I don't even really need to see anything for that. I saw some little bits and pieces of footage or shots, but I was like, okay, that's cool. Like that's enough. I think that being said, I feel that I didn't necessarily have like a preconception of what it was going to be in terms of like the action, probably just for the simple fact that I knew Dev Patel was directing. And so I was like, I mean, is he really as a debut feature? Like, is he going to be able to like do John Wick? You know, like that's a lot to take on, I feel like.
Mhm.
I can't even think of a debut like feature filmmaker that has made a movie that intense with like that much action. Obviously, like in Hollywood, so to speak. Um, Not thinking of other countries and industries, but so that for me, I think in my head, I wasn't consciously thinking it, but going in, I was like, okay, there's gonna be some political stuff because I knew Netflix, got rid of the movie because they were concerned about some of the political messages in the film, things like that. So I was like, okay, so that's gonna be a big part of it. I don't know how big. Obviously, now having seen the movie, it's definitely a major part of the film. And there is a lot. To me, the way I was describing it to someone I was talking to yesterday, it's not like a full blown action thriller, as you already said. It's more
Mhm.
like a drama with action in it, um, which works, I think, for the movie that obviously they were trying to like the story they were trying to get at.
Mhm.
But it's definitely not. I think the cinema score for this movie was like a B plus, maybe, or a B. Which, if we're talking just action movies, like that's a little timid. I think like it's a little below
I
where
was
you.
surprised by the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes being so high just because of it was 84%. Like I
Yeah,
thought that
that's pretty
that
good.
that seemed really high for the the like juxtaposition between what I and maybe others thought they were getting versus
Yeah,
what it actually ends up being.
exactly. And the cinema score in particular is really about it's really about expectation because the way cinema score works is they ask people like right after
Right
they see
after they
the
come
movie
out. Yeah.
what they rate it. And so if you go in, you're like, oh, I'm expecting like John Wick, and it's not that really, and the
You
action
don't
is
have time to sit and think about it and process it. It's like
no,
that
you're like,
immediate
oh
reaction.
wow, like that was kind of disappointing. I am glad I didn't feel that way, but again, I do understand on some level. I mean, I said this in our group chat. There was two different sets of couples that walked out of this movie while we were watching it. I think that's bullshit personally, just for the reasons that I think they left, but also like come on, like you're not even gonna give the movie a chance like to like in its full context and like the full story just to like understand like what
Mhm.
it's trying to say. That
Especially because this is so much like the flashback sequences and all that. Like it's very clearly like from the start setting something up that like you don't get that payoff for until like very late in the
end
movie.
basically. Yeah.
So and that's like another thing that like was sort of one of my issues is that like I didn't find the flashbacks to be like for me, like I was talking about the pacing a minute ago.
Yeah.
Like that's obviously like a huge part of it. Of like we're in the midst of something, then we're gonna flash back to like him and his mom as a child, or that kind of story progresses each more like a little bit more with each flashback.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's kind of like with the present day of like, oh, who is this like police chief? Who is this like religious figure? Like, what is the connection? What is the trauma? Why does he feel this way? Or why does he want revenge?
Yeah.
And so like for me, I feel like the flashbacks didn't have like the biggest payoff because by the time that you finally find out, like, spoiler alert, like the connection between like his mom and the police chief,
Yeah.
that like it wasn't like you kind of were able to infer that there was like some sort of like sexual violence or like he was responsible for her death or something, because like why else would he be so vigilant looking for revenge
Yeah.
against this one particular guy. And so for me, because like you were able to maybe not get like the full picture but like put most of it together, by the
Right.
time they revealed it I was like, okay, so he spent like a lot of time going back and forth between this that hindered the pacing in the present day, and I didn't feel like there was the biggest payoff or end result from that really benefited the decision to like interrupt what we currently had going, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I definitely I agree with that because for me, what held this movie back from being a great movie, in my opinion, there's a few different reasons, but the main thing I think is just the overall messiness of the structure um, of the narrative. So the movie starts and it basically starts with him as a kid, and then you jump ahead. You're getting little bits and pieces here and there about who he is now, what he's what he does basically day to day. And then this kind of plot starts up where he's being put in a position to get revenge. And as that's
Mm-hmm.
going on, as he's realizing different things, connecting different dots, they're doing these flashbacks or putting these images in there. I think I agree. I think honestly, it could have been more subtle, even in terms of like giving a little less information, maybe just even earlier on in the movie, and then maybe making it more of a reveal or more of a quote unquote twist, I guess, later on.
Like I feel like that could have been if it was actually like a surprise that like, oh shit, like this is the guy that killed his mom, and that's like if that was like a big third act reveal or something, that would be a big payoff, I feel like. But because we sort of were all like, oh yeah, of course it is. Like you're saying, that was a bit of the messiness.
Right. Well, also, I think that part of it is that really the main villain is this religious leader, which you don't really know that until like the third act necessarily. He's like in the movie, but you don't really understand like what his connection is to everything else. You know that the police chief is obviously a piece of shit and has done some bad shit. So that makes him kind of the face of it all until you get towards the end. It's like, okay, this guy is bad and is responsible for this, but also this other guy is really the big bad, so to speak. But yeah, I think that I think that's where maybe as a first time director, you could see that there is more messiness in terms of like, okay, how should this be like edited, for example? I don't know, like obviously we don't know what the screenplay looks like for this movie, but I'm just wondering like, is that detailed exactly in sequence like it is in the actual final film, or is it more okay, we're going to put this here and then like, well, it's just kind of a general idea of what it's going to be and where it's going to show up in the movie? Because I think they could have, or even should have, in the edit, they could have pulled out certain pieces and left them out so it was more ambiguous or more mysterious. um and I think that would have been to the benefit of the film, because also, as you were saying, there's like it's a little too stop and start in terms of, okay, here's what's going on in the present day, like this is the character development, this is the action that's taking place, point A, point B, C, etc., and it stops and it goes back to this for whether it's 30 seconds or 5 minutes. Like there's that kind of tension back and forth, and not in a good way. It's like, okay, well, I kind of just want to see what's going on with this and like really get involved and like caught up in the story, but I feel like you can't as much as you want to because it's pulling you out of it and pulling you back uh, to these other things, especially like little details that they put in there, whether it's part of someone's body or a certain image. Like you can kind of garner like what that is alluding to or what it means without it being so explicit or like feeling like they need to really like own in on that part so much. And I think, yeah, again, just more subtlety, less of a heavy hand in like certain elements. I think that's something, again, as a first time director, like you can definitely understand that. And I hope or think that going like in his next movie, whatever that is, I think that Dev Patel can take some lessons away from that in terms of just like telling the story. Obviously, I think in terms of the action, I think we both agree that it was pretty impressive.
I think that's
Overall.
also what makes it like so like obvious between these two parts of the movie, is because like those action sequences are so good and like well choreographed and just like exhilarating, so that then when it does go back, at least for me, I was like, no, go back to that, I want more of that, because that was like so much, had like much better control of as a director, as a filmmaker, than some of the more in between parts.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. For me, I think it's strange. I liked the movie kind of like, I feel like I liked it about the same all the way through. Like I didn't start off like at a certain feeling or like how much I was enjoying the movie and then it like drastically changed like up or down. I feel like I was like, okay, I like this. Like I think it's pretty good. I think that I don't like this so much. Like I think that the camera work could be different or like better here. I feel like the story could be a little bit better, like more clear, like more subtle in certain spots. But I never felt like at any point during the movie I was like, like this isn't good. They're like, I don't like this like very much. Like I wish I was watching a different movie or like I was doing something else. Like I think when I'm watching a bad movie or a movie that I don't enjoy very much, like that's the feeling I have, or like my feelings about it like really fluctuate. Whereas with this one, I felt like very like solid, like pretty much beginning to end. I do think the strength of the movie is in, as much as I think, like we're saying, like the action is very well done for the most part. For me, I enjoyed like the quieter, like character moments with the main character, like Dev Patel's character, when he's like doing his day like daily life, like earlier in the film. Like you kind of learn like how he's like struggling and like hustling his way. I really enjoyed like those moments. And then especially in the latter half of the movie, there's like a training montage essentially that I thought was really great.
Hmm.
That he did a great job with. Some of the supporting characters in that like temple area of the film I thought was handled really well and like was very like the chemistry I thought was good between him and like the other characters in that sequence. And just the vibes were very good. Like the movie is such a downer in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of terrible things going on in the movie, in terms of violence, and you see a lot of poverty and political
Hmm.
machinations and things like that. Like it can be like a tough like sit, and I feel like that's part of like maybe why audiences aren't like super high on it as well. Because it's not like when you watch John Wick, yes, there's like that he gets his dog fucking killed and like his wife is dead and like these things are happening. But it really that movie and like that franchise, just as a direct comparison, like that's very much like a very heightened, stylized, fun in like engagement. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Whereas Monkey Man, like I said, it's a drama with action. And I think again, there are parts of the drama that could have been improved, but I thought in terms of the character work, especially with the lead, I thought that was what kept me like motivated to and engaged with the movie. And I think Dev Patel as a performer was a big part of that because, of course, he's a great dramatic actor. We've seen that in all the way from Slumdog Millionaire to Skins and Lion, etc. But also as on top of that, now him with having these action chops, I thought was just very fun to watch and like that was impressive and kept me on my toes, I guess, just seeing that development.
As far as the action goes, like I'm there was one thing that I don't know, I'm interested to hear if it affected you as well. Like, yes, it was extremely brutal and intense and like very compelling and engaging, but there was so much shaky cam that it was like almost disorienting to me. I don't know if this was just a me thing or if other people felt the same way. Um, but it was like the editing. I don't know if it was the editing or the shaky cam or what, but like there were times when it was just like almost too difficult to follow. Did you feel that way, or am I just
Um,
dumb?
I mean, I think that so I've heard other people say this. So I don't disagree necessarily. Um, I think it I didn't mind it so much. Like it didn't truly bother me, but I definitely noticed it, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
early, especially earlier in the film, I think you could argue maybe in some level that there's like you kind of see a development of the like form of the movie with the action because I think in the third act like it's a lot less shaky and like more smooth and easier to follow in terms of the action choreography and everything. Um as opposed to like the first act or like the middle of the movie where it's definitely more shaky and like disorienting as you were saying. I think when he's in that first fight scene in the club in the bathroom and leaving
Mhm.
that and afterwards like that is all definitely very um it is shaky. Like it's not like yeah, again, direct comparison to John Wick. Like John Wick is super smooth, super clean, highly choreographed and like shot um to like most highly benefit the choreography and like how it's going to look on screen. Whereas here it definitely feels like more like it feels I guess maybe like a less refined type of movie and like that is reflected I think in the images of it. So yeah, I definitely
Is
noticed
the in
that.
the like the brothel sequence, I feel like where it was like the most egregious to me that I because it wasn't this by like definitely did not like ruin the action sequences or like you know it affected them, but it wasn't like a deal breaker or anything. But I feel like in that one, like the chase sequence that ends up in the brothel was like the most uh I don't know if it was just because it was like close quarters that made it a little bit more difficult
Uh,
and relied on that more. But that was definitely where I noticed it the most.
yeah, yeah, no, I think again, I definitely felt it and noticed it, but I it wasn't something where I was like, fuck, like this is bad or like I just like cannot handle this. It was just like, damn, yeah, like that could be better or like I feel like I would enjoy this more if it was done differently or like done in a more improved way, I guess. Um, but I guess maybe because I had heard people say that prior to watching the movie, I guess I was maybe more prepared for it, so I wasn't like, oh fuck, like that's not what I expected. I was like, okay, yeah, like this is kind of like how they described it. Um, so again, I don't know if I'm like cutting it some slack in that regard. Like I definitely think a better version of this movie has the action look better in those scenes, and I think that I could bump it again from being just I think a good movie in my opinion to something like better or great. Um, but again, I think maybe part of that is expectation based. Like you were not prepared for that, and I was on some
Mhm.
level. But yeah, I think it could have been better. Again, first time director, low budget, however they were filming it, I don't know. Um, but I definitely see a lot of room for improvement in those categories. I do think I don't know. I can't remember the last time I was watching an action movie and I was like, "Damn, like this I can't understand or see like what's going on or like how it's being filmed is just not working at all." Um it's been a while because I think that Hollywood has gotten somewhat caught up on that in terms of how the action how you can follow it. At least in these like smaller like action movies like that are really heavily focused on that. But yeah, no, this one definitely stood out like in the wake of John Wick's and
Mhm.
etc. Extraction as another, I guess, example like on Netflix. Um, but
I
I
will
don't
say though, again, not entirely detrimental by any means to the violence because there's some pretty gnarly stuff in here. And I
yeah,
know
definitely.
you had sent in the because Jake and I had seen it ahead of time, and you had sent in our group chat to make sure it would be okay for Reagan to see.
Yeah.
So you kind of got like a content warning of the most brutal kill, which happens in an elevator, and that is extremely gnarly. But what
Yeah.
we're as far as like the violence level or gore or anything like that, like it
Yeah.
wasn't like excessive, but it was definitely brutal. And
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
looking for something of like a John Wick caliber, like it's pretty on par with that and like the inventiveness of things being used for weapons and whatnot.
For sure. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a good shout out there. I think in terms of uh yeah, there's definitely some brutal shit in there, but it didn't seem like to me it was like egregious or like anything much worse than I've seen like in a John Wick, for example, or anything else like that.
Hmm.
I think that because as I was saying earlier, the tone of this movie is quite different. You might perceive it differently than if you were watching a John Wick, which is more like a Looney Tunes exploration, where this is like a heavy like political drama. Um, then yeah, that could be a little bit different. But overall, I thought the tone, the way that that was handled, I thought was all pretty well done. There are a few standout moments that are worse than others, but Reagan, as you were saying, like I wasn't sure how she was going to handle it. I kind of had an idea of what it was going to be like. Overall, it was pretty much what I expected, and she was overall pretty good with it. And only had to like look away maybe a couple times in the whole movie, which is again pretty good. But there was less of it than I think both of us were expecting as well in terms of like action or like gore, or brutality, anything like that. So that helped in that regard. But overall, I mean, I think my feeling is yes, it has a pretty high critic score, I guess, of 87%, like Rotten Tomatoes. I think the Metacritic score is like a 70 or 71. Like it's I don't know what the Rotten Tomatoes actual average score is. But I think I'm right in there. I think that like a 70 or just a little bit like high 60s, I think is appropriate. I think it's
It's
a
3.8 on Letterboxd as the overall
okay.
rating.
I think I mean that's good. I mean that's pretty
Hmm.
good. I'm obviously below that because I gave it 3.5 out of 5, but I think it's a good, not great movie. And it's an impressive directorial debut in some ways. In other ways, obviously there's room for growth. I just looked, the average critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is 7.1 out of 10. So that's right in there. I feel very similarly to that. Um I think it more than anything, I'm like, wow, Dev Patel, like and 71 on Metacritic. I just double checked that as well. He's got a lot of potential. He obviously has a knack for I think having like, being behind the camera and just coming up with ideas, and I think that's all really exciting. And I think I've gained a lot of respect for him like as an artist, and like that he's kind of really put himself out here with this movie. I think that's great. All that aside, like in terms of what I saw like on screen, I had a good time at the theater. I thought I saw things that I hadn't seen in a big movie before, like a studio like Hollywood release. Politically, thematically, there's some things in here that I don't think American audiences have really seen before or are familiar with in general. So I appreciated that. It's just a different type of movie, and like I think that alone it gets me, it had me more engaged and like more interested with like what it had to say or like what its messaging was.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than anything I think I feel qualified to like get into. Obviously, I don't know how it levels with like what is going on like politically, like in India, for example. Um, but between the drama, the character work, the acting, the craft, the action pieces, I had a good time with it, and I definitely, like I said, while I was watching, I was like, damn, I didn't get what I wanted or like disappointed. I thought it was just kind of right for my expectations, and I definitely encourage people to see it, and especially listening to us talk about it. Like if you think, oh, like I think I would like that, give it a shot. I know it's in some Dolby cinemas right now. I certainly thought that worked for the sound, and obviously as an action movie, I thought that was great. Versus if it had been on just Netflix, I think it would have been a different experience maybe. But I think it's a worthwhile film. I mean, obviously it's early in the year, but this is probably one of the better action movies so far. Um, and for me overall, I've only seen 4 movies this year. I think I would say it's probably 3 out of the 4 for me in terms of like ranking, maybe 2. I could see those 2 like interchanging, but again, even the 4th movie on that list isn't like a bad movie necessarily. So
Brother, you haven't seen Madam Web.
I have not. No, I've been ducking some worse stuff.
This
To be
was
fair.
this is number 9 for me on the year as far as the number of movies that I've seen.
Yeah.
And it's sitting at 6 right now. So
Okay.
there's a significant difference between 6 and then my 7, 8, and 9, which is Night Swim, Argyle, and Madam Web.
Right. Oh
So
God.
this is again, I gave this 2.5. It was like 51 out of 100. So like right middle of the ballpark, like you said, as
Yeah.
we just discussed, like plenty of things that we liked about it, that I liked about it, even with that score.
Yeah.
That, like you said, has promise. Dev Patel, always been a fan of him as an actor, and excited to see what he continues to do. I know he pointed out a lot of stuff that we liked in a few places where we think that there will be room to develop as he gets more and more reps behind the camera.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of good stuff coming out of this. And a lot of the letterbox reviews are saying, was it official that Aaron Taylor Johnson is Bond? Did
No.
that?
No.
No, because a lot of the people are saying, fuck James Bond, give me more of this, like, or put Dev Patel as James. Like, man made a case, and I would not be opposed to seeing that either.
Well, he already said he has no interest in that, so I don't
Well,
think
I
that.
don't care what he feels about it, Johnny. I'm talking about what I want.
And I agree. I think like, well, I guess I disagree with what those people are saying. I don't want to see Dev Patel as James Bond necessarily. I think he would be a good James Bond, but I would rather see him do his own thing, make more original stuff. Do it if he wants to do action, do action. If he wants to do drama, do drama. Um, I don't give it. I don't really care that much about James Bond personally, so I think locking in a super talented actor or filmmaker into that role isn't like my ideal scenario. But yeah, I mean, I can see why people, I mean, I don't think people had really seen him like this before. And I think seeing him
Mhm.
in action scenes, his, physique, all those different things that you look for, like he definitely crushed it. And the movie does not work without him. I mean, that's a fact. And I think not just as a director, obviously, but I think if another actor is in this role, not to say other actors couldn't do it necessarily, but I think it really like fell on his shoulders for the movie to work in any capacity. And for me, it definitely did. And he's got a lot of charisma. He's got screen presence, all that stuff. So, yeah, a good little entry here early in the year. We'll see. I mean, by the time we get to the end of the year, after I've seen 40 or 50 movies, I would imagine this will hopefully, if there's a lot of great movies this year, this will be in like the middle or back half of that list. But yeah, no, it's a good kind of like 3.5 action movie that you get, a few times a year maybe. So um, worth checking out in my opinion.
Well, there you have it. Monkey Man in the books. Another episode in the books. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for listening week in and week out. We appreciate the support here, online, on social, anywhere that you show us love. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Stick around. It's going to be picking back up here in coming weeks and months. Summer is right around the corner. Hard to believe it. But with all the movies and shows on the way, follow us on Twitter, stay tuned, and on Instagram, and like us on Facebook. You can also subscribe on YouTube. stay up to date with all the latest episodes and what Zach's got cooking over there. And you can find those accounts at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind, so you can get everything sent straight to your inbox. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube, iHeart, anywhere you can find a podcast. We are there. And come back next week. We'll be talking about Alex Garland's new movie, Civil War. We'll see you then.